conversations. I mean, these conversations are magical, and we would never have gotten them otherwise. And so why can't we keep doing SCA life? Why can't we have, I mean, the teaching aspects, and I'm going to go live next week with a painting, which I couldn't do at an event. I mean, well, I take that back. I've done it at June Fair, but oh my God, what a nightmare, because I have to pack all my stuff, and then there's the public to deal with and conversations, and there's always this one weird person who has to camp out in my area and ask me weird questions. And so, so SCA people are polite, and they're trying to wait for this person and a member of the public, and eventually this person just won't go away. And so being able to go and train my camera onto what I'm doing and say, okay, this is what I'm doing, this is why I'm doing it, and then have a running dialogue of it, is something that I have only ever gotten to do while at Cornish. I've never really gotten to do it in the SCA, and all of a sudden, magically, there's this technology that will allow that to happen. Because there are several things. Go ahead.
Well, I think that, my first, 5, 6, 8 years in the SCA was spent around the fire listening to Laurels and Pelicans and Kings and Queens and Lions Volunteer talk about how things are done and what is and isn't acceptable behavior, and talking about SCA philosophy. And that's how I grew up. That's how I learned what was acceptable and what was not acceptable. And I don't think that goes on as much anymore, because we've gotten so huge that, I mean, I don't have a bunch of new people come in and hang out with us at the fire, because I've got kids and I don't want people I don't know around my kids.
Right.
So
we used to have parties on the Eric. Oh my God. When I first moved on Ontario, that was the thing. You went out to the Eric with whatever bottle of whatever it is that you were drinking at the time, and you went and made friends. The first SCA event I came to here in Ontario, it was a feast in Tacoma, and that was lovely. But the place where I made most of my friends, it was like the second event, and I think it was a Crown, but there was a party on the Eric. And you just wandered around and talked with people, or people would come up and say, hey, you're new, I'm so-and-so. And then you'd sit and talk. And I think that we miss helping people get into the SCA when we miss those experiences. Because those are the experiences that made me want to be a part of the SCA.
Yeah.
If I had just sat, my only event had been that event where I sat there and watched people eat and then saw bread ball fight, I wouldn't have come back. So, I often pine for the days when we used to be a little more social, and it's kind of fallen by the wayside, and it's kind of sad.
Yeah. Well, I'm just sort of wondering what, I think there has been an attempt to do Eric parties, and I think one of the things that makes it really hard, and it's not anybody's fault, is that we have all these fire restrictions. And you
Right.
don't have a gathering place, and people try to put up these propane torches, but it's still really dark and cold, and nowhere to sit, and there's no central place to gather. And so I think we as a group just need to be creative and figure out how to make that happen in a way that's inviting, because honestly, right. I think the last Eric party I went to wasn't very inviting. I mean, and I'm getting old, and I don't want to carry my bench over there, like in the middle of the night, and I don't know.
When did we turn into the old guard?
I don't know. I feel so old with all these lady night interviews. I was number 21. We're at 57. I'm old. Anyway,
I think it's called trailblazing, Misty.
No.
I realized I was a crusty old peer about 10 years ago. When somebody said, well, we'd like to try this thing. And I'm like, we've already tried that thing and it didn't work. And I realized, oh my God, I'm a crusty old peer. Oh, and I had to back up and say, no, you try that. Go ahead and try that. It didn't work for us, but it might work for you. Go ahead and do that. And then I was just like, oh my God, I'm a crusty old peer.
Those words have come out of my mouth as well.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're just like, oh.
I'm an asshole. That's awesome. And don't get hurt.
So I have a whole bunch more pictures of your art because your art is so amazing, and I know you are so much more multi-dimensional than just your art. But I want to look at some of the shields you've painted, and then I kind of want to talk about largesse and a balance between being a professional artist and giving away your work. So I'm gonna share the screen real quick. Oh, of course, it's because my computer died. Here, let me see if I can make this work.
Is it on the other computer?
No, my, you know what happened is the dog unplugged me. So anyway. All right, let me get to the shields. Ta-da! So this is like really only a fraction of the shields that you've painted, but I thought it gave a pretty good cross section. And they're fabulous. And I just, you know, I will personally, like, one of these is mine and it's gorgeous. But I just want to thank you for making the SCA culture, the SCA fighting culture, just elevating it with the beauty that you put on our shields, and that, you know, making disposable art for us. It's incredible.
Oh, thank
yours,
you.
Go ahead.
The orange one, of course.
With the Wonder Woman lines.
Yeah.
The W's on it, right? Right?
Yep.
Yeah, you know, so the first real shield that not the first one I've ever painted, but when I was fighting on a regular basis, I made sure that my shield was always pretty nicely painted, right? And a lot of people have asked, well, why are you doing that? Because it's just going to get dinged up. And I think that that's a question that would be better answered with, why not? I mean, we're supposed to be making this SCA world beautiful. You know, and no matter what we do, we're supposed to be striving for excellence in our accoutrements and our language and our behavior and our clothing. And so, sure, I mean, yeah, it's going to get dinged up, but you can just paint it over, or paint it, you know, paint the dings or what have you. I think that it was Robert's shield, the one with the angel on it. He wouldn't let me have it back for like 2 years. And he fought with it, and it was starting to get a little mushy. And I said, all right, well, let me have it back. Let me rehab it. Because I had told him that I think that my paint job will outlast the shield. And I think it has. I think that he has retired that shield. And so I just feel like I don't think there's such a thing as disposable art, because art is meant to be consumed by the viewer. And now I'm going to get into my, you know, Cornish degree thing here, right?
Your beautiful brain.
But so art is meant to be consumed, and so when we dress, that is art that is consumed by the viewer. When we speak, or when we, you know, wear things or what have you, and so why not have that same kind of art everywhere in the SCA, on tents, on shields, on helmets, I mean, I think that it's really important to look at every aspect of the SCA and really try to dial that in to something beautiful. So that's how I approach the shield painting. And yeah, supposedly I am a professional artist, but those shields are labors of love. And a couple of them actually have been done. I think Steercar, the one I did for Steercar, he actually donated. That was a blank shield that Casimir and I got together with, and that was for the Cancer Tourney Fund, or there was something at 12 night. I think it was a cancer fund. And so Steercar donated that money. Yeah, and then he got the shield, right? That's the kind of thing that, God, how can you not get behind that?
Right.
And so when I go out to an event and I look across the event site and I see like 2 or 3 of my shields go trotting by, I'm just like, I'm totally giddy because people are using them. And you know, they got dings and bashes, and but that's exactly what they would do. I mean, that's exactly how they would be treated. That's exactly what would happen. I think that as modern people, we miss the artistic in our lives a lot because it's so mass produced. You know, ever since the Model T Ford was put on an assembly line and mass produced, we've kind of forgotten that things made by hand are beautiful and should be beautiful and should be useful at the same time. So yeah, I don't know where were we going with this? I was kind of like off in my own world there for a minute. So yeah,
Functional
I just
art,
feel
not
like,
disposable art.
yeah, I just don't think there is such a thing as disposable art. I think that everything should be art, and that's what you should strive for. Everything,
I
everything
guess
you
I
do.
was saying it in a very negative way, but my point was that you make art that is supposed to be used and isn't supposed to stay pristine. You're supposed to enjoy it in a useful way, right?
Right, right.
Which, you know, and I think you doing those shields has, you know, obviously I paint shields too, and then I don't even know how many people I've given your whole theory to. Like I don't even know how many times I've typed that out and told them what to do. This is the way Tam does it.
Last forever.
Yeah, and they do. I have shields that just stay on my studio wall downstairs because they don't function as shields anymore because they're broken. But the art is still gorgeous.
Isn't that fantastic though?
Yeah.
I mean, here's a thing that you look at it and there are so many memories. And there were memories of the viewer, the people that you are fighting with, who that piece of art is a part of. God, you know, if you're in a war and you come running up on somebody, they're dazzled by the art, right? And so, you know, these things produce memory and they produce culture, and so I love the fact that the way that we paint them outlasts the shield and makes it this relic in a way.
And
And
go ahead.
no, I was going to talk about relic, but yeah, go ahead. I mean, I think that that's really important to have relics, although you can have too many probably.
I was just going to
You
say
know.
it elevates the experience, and you know, having a shield that is so beautiful, like I decided that, you know, why am I not making my fighting kit beautiful? Why am I not using silk and painting it and doing all these things?
Right.
Because for me, I'm in armor more than I'm really in anything else at an event. So why am I not elevating it? And so I think, you know, your shield sort of has elevated everything, and not just me, but you know people, I do that, and then somebody else is like, oh well, she's doing that, I can use silk on my thing too, and we just all look better, and
Right.
and the
Well,
experience
and
is better, and
we
you feel
all,
better.
yeah, and it's closer to what we're trying to do. There was several years ago, there was a silk shirt that had a bunch of Arabic writing all over it, and it had been used in a war. It was on display down in Portland. And I was so struck by the fact that this thing was made out of silk and it had been hand painted. And this person had worn it in battle. And I was struck by the fact that we don't really do that. But that's a huge part of that culture. You know, again, it comes back down to, we're not making discrete things. We're making things that should be contextualized inside that culture. And if you are an Arabic persona, that shirt is something that you would be wanting because it has all these beautiful prayers and prayers for, you know, to keep you safe. That's part of the culture that you're trying to emulate. And so these shields are kind of that, my attempt to try and push that, because shields were, that told people who you were. And the more beautiful it was, the more costly it had of materials, the more it said about you. And so sometimes I think we miss that when we're doing things in the SCA. We miss the context when we're just making these little things. And I think that shields, I love shields. I love painting shields because I love the idea that it's going to go out there and be used and abused. And I love that. I love the idea of that. Like I said, I just don't believe in disposable art.
So I'm going to change my phrasing, and no longer disposable art. It's going to be functional art.
Functional art. There's a good one.
Functional. So the other thing I kind of wanted to talk about in the terms of your shield painting and also all the largesse that you do. I mean, you've done a ton of bags for reins and clothes for reins. I have this struggle in my head of, you know, as peers, and just people, I mean, we want to give of ourselves, and I for one enjoy making art for people when I want to make it, and I don't really want to be paid for it. But then I think about, you know, on a cultural and a societal level, about how women's craft and art is always sort of diminished and devalued. And I wonder if subconsciously or unconsciously, like, we do that to ourselves in the SCA. And part of the thing that I was thinking about, you know, and I'm not blaming anyone, this is just sort of this thing I'm thinking about, is that, you know, as a kingdom, when we get new crowns or we get thrones, like typically male kind of craft or art, we put them out to bid and we pay for them. But with cloaks, and you were saying earlier, you know, you made a cloak just to make a cloak, and banners and stuff, usually those are donated.
Right.
And I'm just wondering, as a professional artist, you know, what do you think about all that?
Funny you should ask that question, because I'm actually thinking about it. It's one of the reasons why I have started exploring beading in my professional practice, because it does hit on that whole the work of women being forgotten and not called art. You know, it's called craft. And I personally think that art and craft are the same thing. Any beaded medallion has a huge level of artistic excellence in it. And I think that we are emulating in the SCA, we are emulating this invisibility of women's labor.
Oh no, did we lose her?
I don't know. Come back.
To, I mean, so it's it's so to go back to that cloak from Artemisia, whether or not I was paid for that is immaterial at this point. It has now become this thing, right? It's a piece of fabric, a textile, which is usually a female craft, and I think that that's where in the SCA, I think that we end up elevating women's work, whereas in the real world it was not. You know, the banners that people make, there's a story behind them, and most everybody learns it. And you know, the cloaks that they made for the crown, and I mean, so there's this. I think that the SCA does a better job than the real modern world of elevating women's craft out of obscurity, because we do put such great store on beautiful clothing. I mean, you don't really do that in the real world. Our clothing is, you go to a rack, you buy a shirt, you know, I mean, you'll like the color maybe, but you don't think about who made it. In the SCA, you think about who made things. And if it's a artisan of great renown, you treasure it, right? And that can be either male or female. I think, you know, getting back to your example of thrones or crowns, the amount of material and the type of material probably has more to do with why we get bids, because we did get bids for the new cloaks. So I think that has more of a function to do with finance than anything else. I don't see the SCA as encouraging anonymity in women's work. And I like that. I actually like that about the SCA, that someone can say, oh, well, you know, Janeltis made this. And
Right.
Everyone is like, ooh, it's this big thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, so I think the SCA does a better job than the real world. I think that, because I've seen people wander by with a nice dress or whatever, and I'm like, oh, that's a very nice dress. And that person can tell you who made it, how long it took, and they can tell you how much they love it because that's why they're wearing it, and how grateful they are. And so, I think the SCA does a better job, to be honest.
And I think
and it's
what you say is really valid about how things go to relic status or goddess status. I mean, Janeltis, I think, died before I ever started playing, and I know who she is. I know what she did. I know what she made, and it's still like, oh.
Yeah, I actually was fortunate enough to meet her my first 12th night here. I was wearing Elizabethan. I was like one of 2 people or 3 people wearing Elizabethan at 12th night. And she had her person wheel her up in her wheelchair. She's like, I want to talk to you about that. How did you make that? That's really beautiful. That's nice. I mean, just sharp as a tack and asking me questions. And I was like, wow. I mean, Janeltis looked at my stuff. It was very meaningful. And that's all women's work. If you think about it in those gender terms, it's all women's work. But it still gets conferred status in the SCA. And I think that's amazing, because that doesn't happen anywhere else.
Speaking of costuming, let's look at some of your costumes.
Oh, are you going to come up? Come here.
Here's you in costume. One of my favorite queens up there in the corner. And then I think I have, here's one of.
Oh my God. So you were stalking me.
I totally stalked you.
Oh, there's that brown and gold fabric. Oh.
What's really cool about stalking you is that you're very organized. You can find things. But you obviously this is later stuff. But we're wearing here in the middle, I think that might be one of the first tunics I think I ever saw you wear, and it's absolutely stunning.
That tunic was the first tunic that I made using rectangular construction. It's where I kind of worked out how that methodology happens. I found that piece of it was an amazing piece of fabric. It was hand woven from Africa. And it's just beautiful. It's kind of cream and hand woven. It's got some figurative things happening to it. And there was only, I want to say, 1.5 yards. And I had just sort of researched rectangular construction, and I thought, you know what, I bet I can get a tunic out of this. And I think I had scraps that were no more than this big. And it really convinced me that rectangular construction is a great method for doing things, because in period, fabric would have been really precious. And so you want to, use as much as you can, and rectangular construction uses just almost every bit. And then I thought, well, I like embroidery. How about I embroider this? Because apparently I didn't have enough to do back then. I don't know. I'm not sure why, but I just wanted something that was beautiful, and that spoke to this kind of tunic-y, because I was researching bog clothing coming out of Ireland, and there's no real historical support for that kind of embroidery, but I thought it would be pretty. I thought it'd be beautiful. And that's one of the things that I research. That's one of the things that I research on a regular basis. It's one of the things that I constantly research is embroidery on clothing, no matter what culture. If I run across something on the internet while I'm researching something else that talks about embroidery on clothing, that goes into a folder, and then I go look at it later. I will be crying real tears if my computer ever goes belly up, because I have so many folders full of pictures and links and all kinds of stuff. That's why Pinterest is so dangerous for me. I can lose hours in Pinterest just for that. But I figured, Elizabethan clothing is so pretty. Why not make tunics pretty too?
Well, I think that tunic might have been like the start of like all the fancy embroidered tunics in Ontario. I'm just saying.
I don't know about that, but
So we haven't really talked about your metal work much at all. Was that something that you discovered through the SCA, or did you have those skills before you started?
No, so when I was at Montana State, I had found the SCA, and I had been in the art department, and I switched departments to anthropology and archaeology, but I kept taking metalsmithing because when I first got in the SCA, finding period jewelry was next to impossible. And I was buying jewelry at like dime stores. You know, if it looked vaguely Elizabethan, I was like, oh my God. And so I started taking metalsmithing because I wanted to learn how to make jewelry. And I learned a lot. I mean, I learned all kinds of things. I spent an entire 2.5 years just learning, you know, cold connections and chasing in repoussé and casting. I did a whole semester of casting like the Egyptians and trying to kind of cast like the Norse and sand and you know, so it was a very it kept me sane because anthropology and archaeology are not a lot of art in there. There's a lot of statistics and other sciencey stuff. Interesting, but I had to have some artistic thing going when I was doing it. And so yeah, the metalsmithing, it got to the point where I had my own torch. I mean, I still have my own torch and tanks, and my favorite thing to do is rivet stuff together because I think that's pretty sexy. Also, it doesn't require tanks or, you know, hot connections. I will go through a lot of different things, designs, in order to make something so that it's mostly cold connected, because I don't like soldering. I'm not good at it. so you know, you find something you're good at, and I'm good at rivets. I'm really good at rivets. And so yeah, metalsmithing just was a gateway to getting things that were more what I wanted for my persona. And back in the day when I was making a lot of Elizabethan gowns, I got it into my head that as a French person, and my persona was French, I would be Catholic. And as a Catholic person, I would have a crucifix. And so I made like several crucifixes, which, I mean, you're not really supposed to be doing that in the SCA. And people were a little twitchy about it. But I was like, hey, this is part of my persona. I mean, I'm not pushing this. This is just part of my persona. If you look at paintings, all these women are wearing, you know, something like that. So yeah, it was interesting. I'm not particularly religious, and yet I have a stash of probably 6 or 7 crucifixes that I made. I trot them out every once in a while. I dig them.
Did you make the necklace you're wearing? I think that's your
yeah. Oh my God, yeah. So I think it's in the Museum of London, or it might be the British Museum. There's the Desborough necklace, which is an Anglo-Saxon necklace that was found in Desborough. And it had garnets and these little bullae, because I think it was 3rd century, 4th century. So I couldn't get garnets. So this is fake coral. And then I made all the bullae myself, and because this is what an Anglo-Saxon woman would wear. So I made it because you can't get it in a store, right? I mean, you can get some stuff, but yeah.
Amazing.
So awesome.
So we haven't talked about your service at all either. You're so interesting. You are very interesting.
I don't feel very interesting.
Well, I think you're interesting. But I mean, you've been Princess of Artemisia, you've been Queen of Antir, you were a Baroness of Dragon's Lair, you were the Kingdom Arts and Sciences Minister at one point.
Twice.
Yeah.
So I mean, you have done a hell of a lot of service. What keeps you motivated to do that, and which was the hardest job?
Oh, motivation. Yeah, I'll talk about motivation first, and then I'll talk about the hardest job. This was part of the motivation for me, is wanting the SCA to be a place where people feel like they can get their geek on. And summarily, if I'm autocrating an event, a place where people can come and enjoy themselves, and they don't have to think about the garbages, or the paying the janitor to be there, or whatever. I mean, that's part of my job. Similarly, with the ITHRAs, my job as an instructor is to make sure that these things that I'm teaching people are accessible. And I do think about accessibility a lot when I'm thinking about service, because that's how the SCA maintains itself. That's a good phrase. If you create an event that is not accessible to everyone, I mean, what's it doing then? Why is it happening? And so I really like things that are accessible to everyone. And so when I take on a service role, I try and think about accessibility for everyone. If I'm ANS minister for the barony or for whatever, I think, okay, so how can I get these teachers to come in? Because I'm a big on cross-pollination, so not just teachers from Dragon's Lair, but teachers from all over the place. What would be interesting? What am I hearing that people want to do? Trying to sort of figure out how to help people along in what they're doing. And so that's my motivation, really. And I know it sounds corny. I just want to help people. But the way that I enjoy the SCA, I go to an event and the event runs well, and I don't have to think about it. And somebody had to run that event, but I didn't, and I enjoyed it. So at some point, I step up and do that for other people. So yeah, that's my motivation. That's what kind of keeps me going. I'm not the pelican that Orontius is. I mean, he's like the quintessential pelican. He's constantly thinking about that. I'm a little more selfish because I am just not quite as pelican-y as he is. But that's kind of my motivation. And so, yeah, so the hardest job I've ever done, Kingdom ANS minister. That was very, very difficult both times for a number of reasons. And I think part of it is because this kingdom has such high expectations for its artisans that job can be very difficult to make happen. And really, the higher you go in the SCA, the more you have to deal with administrative stuff, right? Administrativa that is not enjoyable. I used to have a bucket list where I wanted to serve at every level of the SCA, right? Because I did a bunch of work on the Shire level, and I did work on the baronial level, and the principality level, and the kingdom level, and I wanted to do work at the society level, and eventually I want to be a bod member. And I've decided I don't want to do those things anymore because I don't enjoy administrativa. I am not that kind of pelican. Arontius is, though, so he can do that stuff. But I actually need to be a little closer to the situation. I can't be administrative. It's just not my forte at all. I don't enjoy it. And most of the time when you're at that level, you're solving problems, but you're not actually getting to interact with people very much. You have a staff that you interact with, and that is rewarding. But yeah, I think Kingdom ANS was pretty tough.
People in this kingdom are very passionate about their Kingdom ANS, and it gets tense.
Yeah, it gets really tense, and people have a lot of stock in it, a lot of ego in it.
Yeah.
Sometimes when that happens, you can't necessarily always try new things without people getting a little upset, because they're so invested.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I think that's one of the strengths of On Tier, is that we are invested in our arts. And having gone to other kingdoms, On Tier is amazing. We have an amazing cadre of artisans. So I think that that's not a bad thing, but it can get in the way sometimes.
Yeah.
So it it is what it is.
Yeah, that's another one of those jobs that I've watched people go through and I'm like, nope.
Yeah, no, I probably will never do it again. But I've done it twice, so why would I want to do it again? To be honest, I should try other things.
Give someone else a chance.
Right?
Sure. So we've been going almost an hour and a half. Except for me, because I fell off the earth for a while. So, you talk about your bucket list. I wonder what is still on your bucket list. What is some big thing that you would like to do in the SCA that you haven't done?
Wow. So this is a super selfish thing. I'm not sure I want to say it because it's going to make me sound awful. I'd like to be queen again.
I was going to ask you that question because I would love to see you reign again.
My first reign was a little difficult, and
Really? I have no idea why.
Right? That's as far as I'll go on that one. Anyway, and I really sometimes I feel like a fraud as the countess because I'm not sure that I did everything I wanted to do as queen. And I did try. I mean, I did try, but I'd like to try again. I really would. And so, that's a big thing on my bucket list. But that's the issue with that part of my bucket list is that's something that I have to rely on somebody else to make happen. Right. So, it is what it is. But if you're asking for bucket list items that I personally can make happen, I think that I would like to. Oh, I've done almost everything I've ever wanted to do in the SCA.
Wow.
Which is sounding horrible, or maybe that I don't have enough ambition or whatever.
That's what it is. You lack ambition.
Lack ambition. I stuff that's under my control, I just go out and do. And so there's not a lot of stuff that I haven't done because if I want to do it, I go do it. But probably, I think on my big bucket list would be to, I would really, really, really like to get an arts and sciences related event going again, like a known world one. It's something that Arontius and I talk about a lot. I'd like to do another known world ANS because I found that to be just amazing. People from all over the world coming in, and you get to see all these different people, and you get to take all these different classes from people that you would never see otherwise. Talk about cross-pollination. So I'd like to do that again. And on a much more introspective note, I would like to make a kick-ass Anglo-Saxon outfit with embroidery and brass and all the things that comes with it.
Aren't you wearing that right now?
Well, no, it's not good enough. I'm just not satisfied with it.
Will you ever be satisfied?
No.
Nope.
No, there's always, like I said, there's that vista. There's always something over the horizon that I'm headed for. And I think that's probably a big thing. And then probably the last part of my bucket list, which I'm kind of gearing up for, is I would really love, and this is, I'm not sure this would ever get off the ground, but I would love to start and keep going an on-tier atelier, for oil painters, where we would basically function as an atelier did in the Renaissance. And, people would paint and people would paint on things and we would paint little things. And because the ateliers in the Renaissance weren't just about these giant portraits. There was also like little devotionals that were painted for money. Little statues were made, people made brushes. I mean, there's just, a functioning craft house. And I'd like to start something like that, but that's going to have to wait until I'm out of school. But that would be something that I think would be pretty amazing. And can you imagine the largesse that would come out of that? That would be so cool. Cool. Portraits of the next king and queen, right? And all done on period gesso with period pigments and period paints. And oh my God, see, that would be cool. So
would you do that as a guild?
What's that?
Would you do that like as a guild?
Well, so no. uh, I think that I would rather sort of model it on the master apprentice relationship that was done in Italy at the time, which wasn't really guild related. You got things from guilds, like the colorists guild would give you your pigments, and there would be some guilds that would make your frames and some guilds that made your brushes. But the master apprentice relationship, as far as painting is concerned, is not really guild related. It's more a passing down of methodology. And so it would be really cool to get that going. I think that would be very interesting. So yeah, those are my bucket list items. And one requires someone else. One requires that I have a little patience, and the other requires that I actually have time, because I'm headed into my MFA this summer, and so there's 2 years that I'm doing something else, and something has to give, and the SCA has been the thing that's had to give, which is kind of a bummer, because I just haven't spent as much time in the SCA as I've liked previously.
You say that, but you're still very active for somebody who is going to school full time and has a business of her own, and
well, that's because of Rontius, right? He drags me
does
everywhere.
help to be married to a mover and a shaker,
right? So he packs the van and he's like, all right, we're ready to go, and I'm like, all right, fine. And I'll get in the van and he'll drive and I'll do whatever it is I do in the van, and we arrive and put stuff up, and then he goes off and does his meetings, and so, and I do my thing. And so yeah, it has really helped to keep me in the SCA. I don't think that can be understated, because if I didn't have him, the 3 years that I spent at Cornish, you probably wouldn't have seen me in the SCA, because it's difficult. It's really difficult to. So, oh my God, sometimes I was just like, I am so tired. I don't want to go anywhere this weekend.
Yeah.
And he'd be like, okay, well, so I'll drive and I'll set everything up. All you have to do is just show up. And so how can you say no?
I think he loves you a little. Do you have someone fighting for you right now, or do I need to whip my husband into shape?
So it kind of goes back and forth. I don't think right now I've got anyone specific. There's a couple people that ask to fight for me every once in a while. So I don't know. I mean, I don't whip Vilius.
Whip him!
It would be for very selfish reasons. I need a training partner, and I would love to see you be queen again. And it would be really great for him to learn how to talk in front of a crowd.
I love Vilius. I absolutely love Vilius. That was when he asked to fight for me. Because I've been kind of picky about people who fight for me, because I really want to rule the next time. If I'm so fortunate to have a next time, I want to rule with someone who has a similar moral compass. And Vilius is amazing. Vilius thinks about others. He's very selfless. I think he'd make an amazing king. I really do. So yeah, I mean, I feel like if you feel like you have to whip him, I mean, who am I to say no, right? But I think he'd make a great king, and I would do all the talking. So,
I think he would be a fun king, and I think that he would listen to you, which I think is important.
I'd sure make him look pretty.
Yes, you would. You would make anyone look pretty.
True story. And his laugh would be like the best.
Epic.
Yeah, there'd be a lot of laughter, because there'd be him and Arontius and me and you guys, and so there'd be a lot of laughter in that reign. It'd be awesome.
All right. Well, I have asked most of my questions, and we've been going a long time, so I feel like we've kept you a long time. Dawn, do you have, or Shaxi, do you have anything else to add?
I don't have any more pressing questions. Laurellen, do you have any questions, anything you'd like to say, questions for us? Anything, any parting gifts? No pressure.
No pressure. I've really been very excited by the way that that we as the SCA have taken to the internet and these videos, I would really love to see us keep doing that. You know, keep thinking through that. Make it so that more people can be involved. Get out there and do stuff to show people. I would really like it if we would continue to do that. I want people to think about that, because honestly, these peeks into people's lives are just, they're kind of amazing.
Yeah.
And it's really sweet. I've watched Gwen the Potter throw pottery for a decade, but I still watch her videos because it's cool. I mean, this is, something you don't get to do. Or if you get to do it, it's very rare. And so these are peeks into people's lives that I would encourage anybody to seek out. I hope we continue that as a kingdom. I really do.
too.
Me too. Me too. Thank you for gracing us with your presence and for everything you've done for both of us in the SCA. Yeah, we would not be, either of us, who we are without your light guiding us. So thank you for that.
So true. I mean, I don't know if you remember my first sewing lesson, but I think I sewed the slowest of anybody that's ever sewed in their life, and you were so patient with me, so patient. Yeah, I don't think I would have a foot in the art community in the SCA if it wasn't for you.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's nice to hear, but I may have put your feet on the road, but you guys are the ones that did the journey. So thank you, but I think you do both yourselves a disservice. I think you had a lot more to do with where you're at than I did.
Well, we love you very much.
We do. Thank you so much for your time and for talking with us. And just a teaser for everybody else out there, we're going to be talking to another one of Dragonslayer's gems next week, Countess Elizabeth, who I'm very excited about because she is a fascinating woman. And I mean, she does things that I don't think anybody knows. So I'm excited to learn more about her.
So many layers to her. There's a lot of layers to her, and she's an amazing person.
She's one of those people I've never been able to sit down and have a conversation with. I've had drunken peer tricks in the hall passing, but I've never gotten to sit down and talk to her. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Me too.
Yeah, car rides with her are amazing.
I bet.
Well, we'll get a little taste of that next week.
Awesome.
Thanks again.
Thank you. Good night.
Night.